Every year, hundreds of offenders are released from TDOC facilities on parole. Once released, they report to offices just like this one here in District 41. When they come, they go through the intake process, which is where they learn what they can expect from their parole officer, as well as the rules and regulations they need to abide by while on parole and until it expires. Today, I have an appointment with Officer Angela Woods, who's going to walk me through that intake process and let me know what I could expect if I were an offender and how I'm going to be set up for success as a parolee. So I'm going to sign in, and then we're going to go meet Officer Woods. Hi, good afternoon, Officer Woods. I'm Rob.
Hi, Rob. I'm Officer Woods. This is our intake room. In here, we will go over your paperwork for intake with our parolees. We do the pictures with our parolees, and then we conduct the drug screens.
Wow, that sounds like a pretty in-depth process, so I say we go ahead and get started. Okay, so I've signed in, I've met Officer Woods, and I'm here in the intake room. This is where the majority of the intake process happens. So Officer Woods, now that we've come in, you've introduced yourself, what's the next step? Where do we go from here?
The next step is we're going to take your photo ID.
Okay, so what do you need me to do to make sure that this picture turns out the way you need it to look?
Okay, well, first thing is there's 2 lines on the floor. If you'll put your feet in between those 2 lines for me.
In between the 2 lines.
So we can get you centered.
Okay.
And hands down. Actually, if you'll pick up the TDOC board, that is where that is what we give the offenders to hold with their TOMAS number on it, so we can identify each picture.
Absolutely, and I think that's important for the viewers. We mentioned TOMAS. Every offender who comes into TDOC's custody gets a TOMAS number, and TOMAS is our offender management system. So any offender who's been with TDOC, present, past, and into the future, will have a TOMAS number, and that will follow them from the time they come in to the time they expire. So thank you for pointing that out, Officer Woods. So, so you said I got to hold this, slouching?
No, we need you to stand up straight.
Okay, stand up straight.
And we'll take your photo. And if you'll turn your head to the right and look at that look here sign, and we'll take your profile. Nope. Just your head.
Just my head. Okay, okay.
There we go. And gotcha.
Excellent. So was that a good picture? Is that what you needed?
Yes.
And what exactly was that for? What was the purpose of taking my photo?
Well, we take your photo so that we can update your photo in TOMAS, so we have a good idea of what you look like now. You may look different. And we also provide IDs that you provide to law enforcement if you ever encounter law enforcement.
So as a parolee, I have to have that ID on me at all times?
Yes.
Okay. So now that we've taken a successful photo that will be used for my photo ID, what's next?
The next step would be a urinalysis. We do drug screen here in intake. We have one of our male officers who will take you to the bathroom and drug screen you. We use a 10-panel drug screen to test you for the most common drugs: cocaine, marijuana, opiates, benzos, etc.
So you're testing for everything?
Yes.
Make sure I'm clean?
Yes.
What if I'm not? What if I fail the urinalysis? What happens?
In the event that you fail the urinalysis, we have you bag the urinalysis with the officer. We do have to keep a chain of command, so you will be with your urinalysis until it's brought into this room and placed in the refrigerators to be sent off to lab for testing.
Okay, but intake does continue even for that offender with the dirty urinalysis?
Correct.
Okay, so say that I didn't fail the urinalysis, what's the next step in this process?
The next step in the process is to begin the paperwork and fill out the forms.
So there's no fingerprinting?
No, not with parolees. Most parolees have been through Tennessee Department of Corrections, and so their fingerprints are already on file. And
what about a DNA sample?
Typically, the DNA is on file. If your crime was committed prior to July 1998, then you wouldn't need it, but typically that's on file. But if it's needed, we would complete it at this time.
Wow, I never knew that. I just thought that fingerprinting and DNA was all a part of the intake process.
Not for parole.
Excellent. Okay, so what's next? After we've done all that, what's the next step?
The next step is to go over the forms and sign the paperwork.
I'm going to get right to that. Officer Woods, I know that you're super busy, so thank you so much for walking me through that and all that information. It was incredibly valuable. I really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you
so much. So now I'm getting ready to go sit down with parole manager Tanisha Williams-Pentecost to go over that paperwork and see what it entails, what all is going to be covered in it, and what I'll be learning from all that paperwork that's given to me as a parolee as it kind of establishes the guidelines for me as an offender on parole and community supervision. So as you guys can see, I've been able to slow down manager Pentecost here. She's super busy, but she's taken a few minutes to talk to us a little bit about this packet of paper that every parolee gets as they go through the intake process. So Manager Pentecost, thank you so much for joining us. I really, really appreciate your time. So let's just jump into it. What all is this packet of paper? This is very important to me as an offender. So what is in this packet of paperwork?
Well, in this packet, it just goes over all the forms that the offender will be going over during intake. The first one will be the parole certificate. Our intake officer will go over that. She'll go over every single rule, give examples of it, and make sure that the offender understands by initialing each rule.
Okay.
The next one will be our notice of offender non-discrimination and grievancy and reporting requirements. And this just basically tells the offender their rights, that no person under the supervision should be discriminated against, race, color, national origin, anything like that. It gives examples of grievable matters as well as examples of non-grievable matters.
So making sure they understand there is a due process.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
The next one is the release of information. If our offenders sign this information, and it gives us the right to have like a drug treatment program or hospital, if we turn that information into them, that the hospital or the drug treatment program will give us that information. Now, based on HIPAA laws, some hospitals don't give us that information at all because of that. But the offender can revoke this form at any given time in writing.
Okay.
Next, we have the assessment of notice of obligations of fee exemptions. And this just let the offender know that they have to pay supervision fees while on parole. So they have to pay $45 a month. If they have some type of hardship, like disability, become unemployed, anything like that, they can apply for a fee exemption.
Okay. So that would be good to help them. You know, again, just coming out, they don't always have employment immediately, so that's good to know.
Right.
That $45, there's ways to work around that.
Exactly. And the next one, it just tells them about their drug screen. If they're test positive, they have to pay $18 for their drug test.
Oh, okay.
The next one, it goes over the prohibited items in the office. They cannot have any weapons, of course, cell phones, minor children, backpacks, baggy clothes, laptops, hats and sunglasses. We tell them to leave it up front due to safety reasons.
None of that comes back through this door.
No, they have to take coats, everything off, leave it up front. We do accommodate our offenders because we understand some of them do ride the bus, so we have a box. That's why we have a box up front and a coat rack for them to hang their clothes up. Okay. And then our last form that we have them to fill out is the collateral contact information form. We like to get at least 3 contacts from them, and this way this helps the officer and the offender if anything should happen and we need to get in contact with them to have a collateral contact for us to call.
Okay. That's a lot of information. I know you just kind of breezed through it with me just for the sake of time. That's a lot. It's really, really in depth. And Officer Woods, who's a phenomenal officer, I thank you for allowing her to walk us through that process. It's really in depth, and it goes through a lot of steps to making sure the offenders understand what's expected of them. But for you guys, you officers, your job actually starts before the offender is even released. Can you tell us about how that works? What happens when you are notified that an offender is going to be released from a facility reporting here to the Pavilion office?
All right, so we are notified by our BI release plan unit, and that is a group of people that is in contact with the Board of Paroles, and they let them know when the offender is released, and then they send an email to my release plan investigator. Once he receives that email, he has 5 days to go out and conduct an investigation. So basically, he is going out to their residence to see if the offender can live there, and if it's okay for them to be at that address.
Okay. Is there anything else that you check beforehand, or is there anything else that goes into information gathering in terms of making sure that you know and understand who this offender is before they report?
Or you're talking about the release plan?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. So another question that we ask them is, do you have weapons in the house? So if they say yes, we tell them, are they willing to remove their weapons from the house? And if they're not willing to, then of course we deny that release plan. If they are willing to remove the weapons from the house, then we'll go back out and approve the plan if they remove the weapons. But those are some questions that we ask. And if they're willing to support the offender if they are unemployed,
Okay. So it seems like it's a very, very thorough process from day one when you guys are notified of the offender to the point to when they get here and they receive this packet of paperwork. So what is the point of this paperwork, and what is the number one thing you want me as an offender to know before I walk out of this office at the conclusion of the intake process?
Well, we want our offenders to know the rules of supervision. That's a biggie. We want them to know that if for any reason that they stop reporting, don't. They may have tested positive for a drug screen. Just know that if you talk to your officer, they will work with you because you can be sanctioned. If you get in trouble with the law, call your officer and let them know immediately. Some offenders, they think that, oh, when I come back in, I'll call my officer, I'll let them know. But we need to know immediately if you've been arrested or not. Just communication is the big key of it. Talking to your officer, letting them know what's going on. Even if you need any type of help, we have a lot of resources here with the Department of Corrections that they can get.
Absolutely. I think that's phenomenal. I think you guys are a great example of what we're doing all across the state to help our offenders make sure that they're stepping out of the facilities onto parole on the right foot, and they're starting off initially going down the right path. And that's what TDOC is all about. We want to make sure that our offenders are successful. So as you can see, this process is very in-depth. It seems to be a little grueling, but it's all about ensuring that we're preparing our offenders for success and making sure that when they come out, they are on the right path, because successful offenders mean lower recidivism, and that means safer communities. And that's the Tennessee Department of Corrections' overall mission, is safer communities and a safer Tennessee. We thank you for watching this episode of TDOC Talks. Thank you, Manager Pentecost, for you and your staff walking us through this process again and kind of explaining it to us and giving us kind of an idea of just how much goes into this process and how much goes into ensuring, again, that the offenders are starting off on the right foot and they're as prepared for success as possible. We thank you guys for watching. As always, we encourage you to go to our YouTube, our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram. Follow us, like and subscribe to those appropriate pages. Thank you for watching. And if you want any more information on the parole process or probation, or information for communicating with your local probation or parole office, you can find that information on our website at tn.gov/correction. We appreciate you guys watching. Have yourselves a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time on TDOC Talks.